Hey, how are you? It's me, Alex. I was just checking out my favorite movie sites, and one of them is Mondo Digital, which is one of the prime sources for DVD and Blu-ray information for guys in my generation, for sure. And I saw a review drop of the recent, very exciting UHD release of Giuliano Carnimeo's Giallo film from 1971, which is The Case of the Bloody Iris, starring Edwige Fenech and George Hilton. And I gotta say, this is a movie which to me was my gateway into the Giallo genre outside of the Dario Argento films. I have a special place in my heart for The Case of the Bloody Iris because that was the first film in which I got to hear music by the composer, the wonderful composer Bruno Nicolai, who just had his birthday yesterday. And The Case of the Bloody Iris was possibly my very first Giallo on VHS in my collection, in my growing bootleg tape collection back in the day as a teenager. And I remember this film being really quite low on blood, but high on style. I was lucky my tape was widescreen, it wasn't cropped, because The Case of the Bloody Iris is beautifully composed in scope. The DOP was Stelvio Massi, who went on to make a number of crime films with Maurizio Merli. And he also made The Emergency Squad with Thomas Milian. The Case of the Bloody Iris is it's set in this high-rise apartment block. The suspects are the neighbors. There is a murder early on in a crowded elevator lift going up, and then the body is discovered. This girl has been stabbed, and suspicion falls on the building's architect and on the girls who live on that floor. And then a couple of girls, one of them is Edwige Fenech, just move into the apartment that used to belong to the victim. And then there is this subplot with Edwige Fenech doing the photo sets with this exaggerated photographer played by Oreste Leonello. There is a subplot involving the humdrum police procedural side of things, the investigator being this gruff inspector who has a loser sidekick, and they go around inspecting crime scenes and gathering postal stamps for the inspector's collection. The Case of the Bloody Iris really works well on repeat viewings. It's a fairly shallow film. There is no pretense at some greater meaning, beyond the style and the usual gallery of two-dimensional characters uttering questionable dialogue. But it's a real joy to behold. As I said, there is beautiful visuals. There is a lot of play on the depths, so there is a lot of rec focus, and the light is also really clever. The way the building itself is filmed in a series of nicely orchestrated shots gives it an aura, gives it a character, so the building is quite memorable. This film fits in nicely with the Sergio Martino series of Giallo movies being made around the same time, movies like All the Colors of the Duck. It's once again, you see Edwige Fenech wearing that wig. And interestingly, in the early scene in the movie, you see her with her, I think, more authentic, shorter haircut. The same one you see her with in Strip Nude for Your Killer. But then for the rest of the movie, she dons the wig. Also during the sex scene, she dons that wig, and nobody questions that. It's just one of those things in that stylized universe. Also the outfits, I remember what struck me the first time I watched Bloody Iris was that the girls wore ties, like sort of suits and ties, sort of, that was interesting. And there was a really elaborate murder in the basement. There is a nice atmospheric stalking scene in the movies, in the buildings, boiler room, with those pipes and things, which almost makes it look like something out of a sci-fi film, with the backlit pipes and the darkness. So my main pleasure in this film is the visuals, and they almost make up for the overall shallowness of the film. I've seen the case of Bloody Iris at least 4 times, and I'm sure I will watch it a couple more times in the future, especially now that there is this new 4K Blu-ray from this new label. So another thing I heard today which excited me was this director Sean Baker, who honestly I'm not terribly familiar with his films, but he's a bit of a big deal now because he's just won a prize at the Cannes Film Festival, and he apparently champions films about marginalized people and sex workers and people like who are migrants. And the great thing I learned is that he's also a big Severin fan, and he's into Jess Franco films. So I'm gonna take it upon myself to explore Sean Baker's filmography and try and see what this guy is like, because he openly wears his passion for sexploitation and European genre cinema on his sleeve. And there is a great video of him going through the Severin cellar and picking up a few titles. So I'm wondering how that passion for European genre cinema, how that translates into his work, which I think is more of he's an indie filmmaker with budgets with like $1-2 million, which is quite modest for if you think how it measures up against like even the low budget Hollywood film, we're talking 40 million or whatever. So he's obviously more of a true independent filmmaker, and clearly an intelligent guy, but I've not seen his films yet, and I know there is one movie there about this little girl living in a motel or something, so I'm really excited to check that out, because I think Willem Dafoe is in that film, and Willem Dafoe is the man. And also I've been recently exploring the cinema of Larry Fessenden, this another filmmaker who went under the radar for many years. And the first movie I saw from him was this one here, which is Wendigo, and I quite enjoyed it. There is it's a snowbound landscape. It's a very tight little movie in the sense that they wrench the most out of limited locations and work wonders with the atmosphere. It's a thin narrative, but it's just enough for this kind of movie so that the atmosphere takes over, and there is also enough there for you to kind of start filling out those gaps in your mind and contributing to this legend in your mind, letting the story grow, unfold in your mind. So this was my first time watching a movie from Larry Fessenden, and I also recently watched his cult film from the 90s, which is called Habit, and this is a contemporary urban vampire film in color, shot on film. I believe it was shot in 35mm without permits, I presume, back in the day when New York was still a tiny bit dirty, I guess. And it was interesting watching that film because I thought the editing in the first couple of minutes was really sublime. Like the opening was it looked like an European auteur film, the way the montage was, the way I think Larry Fessenden also did his own editing on that film. The way they were just manipulating the image was amazing. And then when the story proper kicks in the sense that the characters get introduced in a series of dialogue scenes, this is where I had trouble relating to them, because I'm just not part of that scene. So I don't know, I vaguely sort of understood what the characters were. They were sort of transient people, and I guess everyone in their own little egotistical bubble and things. So there was that uneasy balance between authentic locations, and there is quirkiness, and there is a touch of the gothic, a touch of the horror in this film, in Habit. And this film sits uneasily in my mind because I've not really seen anything like this before. So there is a lot to process there, and I would like to give it another watch before I can sort of formulate my opinion a bit more, you know, a bit more clearly, let it crystallize, let it sit in my mind for a little while. I know that some of the cinematography was very, very interesting, especially in the way natural light was used, and those nighttime street sequences were cool. And I think both films, both Wendigo and Habit, share this unusual editing rhythms, which is clear evidence that the filmmaker is a thinker and has an interested in film as a language, as a means of delivering information in a very personalized way. So that makes them interesting, but this will also, I think, turn some people off, because the blood doesn't really flow. The film doesn't have easy easy to digest sort of. It's a genre film, but it's also an auteur film, so it's not a film that's an easy viewing. You have to participate a little bit, and I thought bits of it were also frustrating, I guess, but I also definitely anticipate already going back and watching Habit again. And I know there is interviews with the filmmaker online. Generally, Larry Fessenden is better known probably as an actor, and also as someone who gave a push to a few filmmakers when they were starting out, who have since grown prominent in their own right. People such as Kelly Reichardt and Ty West. Okay, so you watched this far. If you watched up to this point without skipping, can you just leave a plus in the comments? That would be really great. Just put a plus. That would be awesome. And now you get, as a little treat, a mini review of a Jean Rollin film. Jean Rollin movie reviews are quite popular on my channel, and I just rewatched his 1997 vampire film, The Two Orphan Vampires. I saw this film before on DVD, which was dreadful in terms of quality. It was really, really scrubbed and blurry with very poor resolution. So now it was a revelation, discovering the film grain and the depth of field and intricacies of outdoor lighting in this film. Two Orphan Vampires, which is a great example of what's good and terrible about the cinema of Jean Rollin. Like, it's really sentimental. If you saw the film, his film Lost in New York, or if you remember the really soppy flashbacks in The Living Dead Girl, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like this really very smooth and idyllic depiction of girl friendship and some kind of fairy tale, Never Never Land. And at the same time, there is the beauty of cemeteries and real locations, appreciation for Gothic corners in modern day France, and just the atmosphere is so beautiful. So The Two Orphan Vampires is adapted from Rollin's own novel, which I have somewhere. It's more of a novella. It's rather on the thin side, and it's about these two girls who can only see by night. During the day, and they're in this orphanage being looked after by Catholic nuns, and by night they see, the blindness is lifted and they see as if it's daylight shot through a blue filter. So a lot of the nighttime footage is shot day for night, and some of the exteriors were also shot apparently in New York City. The acting is all over the place. Like, within the same scene you get more inspired moments and totally laughable moments of zero credibility, so I don't want to exaggerate. This is really Jean Rollin at his best and his worst. I really appreciated the graininess and beauty of the photography, but it's also a self-indulgent film where I think Jean Rollin was at this point just making a movie for himself to feed his own obsessions, and it's not like it doesn't really add to his pre-existing canon, and it's not really a real horror film because we're not confronted with any intense moments. It's more like a fairy tale, and like I said, a hugely sentimental one at that. Let me know if you want me to cover Two Orphan Vampires in a full-on deep dive kind of video review, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.